My first response to the question would be that in this country today, the quickest answer is fragmented across all those four pillars. That what we have across various provinces and territories is we have elements of good infrastructure that in many respects, in many ways, support individuals and families to make good decisions, to have control, exercise self-determination. But it's certainly not in any shape, manner, or form consistent across the country. And even in provinces and jurisdictions that have good elements of some or all the pillars, it isn't even widespread within that particular province. We still have, 35 years later, we're still doing pilots in individualized funding. Families, individuals still rely on a service system that was primarily created, invented, produced almost 2 generations ago. So at a systems level, I think we could correctly describe the Canadian system as one that still vests both power and resources within structures and systems and services rather than in families and individuals. And we haven't yet made the transition, or maybe it's not even a transition. Maybe we haven't made the fundamental recognition that the most important person in this equation should be the individual and or their family, as opposed to the services and programs that we fund. Because we still try today to fit people into programs instead of maybe reminding programs that the reason they exist was to respond to needs. And if they aren't responding in a way that's still coherent, then perhaps the impetus for change should be with them, not the family. Like, you shouldn't be telling the family, wrong choice, pick something else, because your menu doesn't allow it. We need to get the services and the government to start to figure out that if people are going to be able to live sensible lives in the way they wish to do so, then they have to have ultimately the choice as to how that's done. And we haven't really made that conversion. Why? I mean, there's a certain inertia to a system. You fund it. We have government has a certain way of funding agencies and services. There's a certain comfort in that, the block funding. We fund things and things do things to people. Making that transformation requires a lot of change at a lot of different levels, right? It requires government to acknowledge that there shouldn't be discomfort in flowing money to people. There's no less risk in giving people money than it is giving a service agency funding. But the government seems to be much more inclined to give lots of money to things as opposed to people. And then the moment you give money to people, there's accountability structures that come into place that make it so onerous that people don't want the money in the first place. Yet we'll give tons of money to agencies that don't do any better job of managing the money than individuals do. So I think there's a mindset there. I think services and agencies have to become much more aware that they exist only to provide a response to families and individuals. They don't exist to run the service. Service is not important, right? Service is a result of a set of needs being identified and being responded to. But we have too many agencies, too many services whose only reason to exist is to run an effective and efficient service, as opposed to holding themselves accountable to do they actually respond correctly and appropriately and sensitively to the needs of families. That's the key criteria. And then I think the other reason is families and individuals haven't yet stepped up to the extent they need to demand the kind of control they need to have over their lives and the service and supports that go in around their sons and daughters, or the individuals themselves. I think that's all part of those things. And we still have lots of families, lots of individuals, because of the way in which the generation has sort of been evolved, that take great comfort in the kind of safety and security that services and programs provide, right? There are a couple of things I think we need to do better than we currently do. I think first and foremost we need to create space where these groups, either collectively or separately, can come together and actually share, make the connections. I mean, there's real value into peer-to-peer kind of relationships and conversations, family to family. Families learn from other families. Professionals going in and giving a lecture about what's best for you it should in fact be ignored most times. It's coming from another family who've lived that life, who've faced a similar problem, and have been able to, through their own devices, create a solution that's acceptable. That's what we need to share. We don't do nearly enough of that. And for that to happen, we need to have governments federally and jurisdictionally investing more in these agencies, these organizations that actually support families or self-advocacy, give them capacity and space to actually meet and share. We need to do also a better job, particularly if we're talking about sort of transformational kinds of issues like individualized funding, independent planning. We need to get to families and individuals the knowledge, the information about what this is. I mean, if you had to pick one topic in this country that's misunderstood, IF, individualized funding, would be one of my best examples. There's lots of other ones, but individualized funding, you'll get as many different definitions of that concept as you would get people that you've asked a question of, both at a consumer, family, and more worrisome at a government level. So we have governments and families rejecting something, possibly, without quite knowing what it is that they're rejecting, except they've heard rumors that it's too expensive, it's this, is whatever, is onerous, so we reject that. Or equally problematic, you have families or governments adopting and espousing something they don't quite understand, and then you see examples of it being rolled out in a certain way, under a certain title, when you look at it, that really, they're calling it individualized funding, but it's just not. It's just, they're missing some fundamental elements to what would make individualized funding an appropriate model. So I think the other of strengthening the family and individual consumer movement would be knowledge, would be to actually get knowledge that's understandable and relevant. But what's happened in many respects over the years, the government simply moved the responsibility from them to the community, and the resources didn't follow. So it's, well, as a government, we can't do this quite well and as good as we'd like with our resources. We're going to give it to you, community. We know you'll do a better job. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to give you enough resources to do it. And we've never caught up, right? We've never seen the same kind of investment in the community and in government, in community structures that needs to be associated with enabling the community to sort of address and respond to its own needs. It's never been done. We've seen nothing but reductions to investment in community-based organizations in this last 20 years in this country in terms of family supports, organizational kinds of capacities. So it makes it even increasingly harder to get community to appropriately respond, for them to be able to bring together families in a way that's sensible for them. We've got lots of examples across this country now today that families are so stretched to get access to the kind of supports they need at a local family level that they're hard-pressed to join a larger movement, and in fact, they're hard-pressed to add their voice demanding more at a systemic level for fear that they might in fact lose the bit of support they currently have at a very specific family level. So it's a tough situation. I'm optimistic. I would have hoped, and I did hope, that we would have been able to use it in a more visible way to this point. I mean, it's not a new document anymore, right? It's almost a point where it starts to vanish from people's memories. So if we don't start to actively engage families and individuals and organizations that rally around the convention as a starting point and a place to push from, then it's just going to be another document that bureaucrats possibly read, possibly don't read, and either say, nice, doesn't apply to us, or not.